So we're gonna do another example like what we did yesterday, where we're plotting a polar coordinate, but then also renaming that polar coordinate. So the first thing that we want to do is figure out where this point lies. All right. So luckily these are both positive. Remember from yesterday that there are several ways that we can rename a coordinate. We could have a positive radius with a positive angle. We could have a positive radius with a negative angle. And then we can have a negative radius with a positive angle and a negative radius with a negative angle. All right, so what we have right now is this one right here. Okay, so we're going to find the other three. Let's go ahead and plot this point first. So I'm going to find my angle 5 pi over 6, which is positive. So I'm going to start at the initial ray, right, the polar axis, and I'm going to go around 5 pi over 6. So I know I need a radius of 2, so I'm just going to go ahead and go around on the radius of 2. So until I find 5 pi over 6, which is right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and find 3 more ways to name that point. So let's stick with the positive radius for now. All right, the other thing that we can do is we can go in the negative direction. Okay, so instead of going up, which is the positive direction, we're going to go down. All right, so we can see that if we go down, we would have to go this amount of opening to reach that point. Excuse me. So we need to figure out, well, how many degrees is that? All right. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can count the tick marks if you want and then see what that is on the positive side. That can be a little bit time consuming. What I want you to realize is that right here, from this axis to the other side is 180 degrees, or pi if we're talking about radians. And then we just have this amount of opening right here. All right. And you can kind of tell from the other side that that's pi over 6. Right. So if I wrote pi over 6, if I wrote pi with a denominator of 6, that would be 6 pi over 6. And if I added one more pi over 6, that would give me 7 pi over 6. So we have negative because we went down, we went in the negative direction, but with an opening of 7 pi over 6. All right, so that's one way that we could rename it. Now let's go ahead and start thinking about the negative radius. Okay, so I want to clarify a little bit more. I'm sorry, these should be 2's. I just realized that. So that should be a negative 2. I'm sorry about that. All right, so a negative 2. Well, basically that means a reflection of 2. So yesterday we discussed that there is no axis here, right? But I want you to realize that if I have a negative 2, that is just a reflection. So that's as if I were starting at this point. All right, so if I'm starting here, right, and calling that negative 2, let's see what the distance is in both the positive and the negative direction to get to this point. All right, so remember that this way, right, counterclockwise is positive. So if I'm starting here, how many degrees do I have to go in the counterclockwise position to get to this point? The way that I like to think about it is that this whole angle measure is 2 pi, right? So if I'm going all the way around to this point, except for this amount, which we figured out is pi over 6, I can just do 2 pi minus pi over 6, right? So that would be, if we do 2 pi, that's 12 pi over 6 if we're using a denominator of 6, minus pi over 6, and that gives us 11 pi over 6. So that was the positive direction because we went counterclockwise. Now let's think about clockwise, the negative direction, so this direction. Well, if I'm starting here and I'm going in this direction, I just have to go this amount right here. So if I start at negative 2, going in this amount, well, that's an opening of pi over 6, but remember that we're going in the negative direction, so that would be negative pi over 6. And now we have 4 ways to rename or to name that same exact point. We have the original and then the 3 additional that we found.